The ingenious gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha. Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. Part 1, 1605. Prologue and Poems. First chapter, which deals with the condition and exercise of the famous Hidalgo Don Quixote de la Mancha. In a place in La Mancha, whose name I don't want to remember, not long ago there lived a Hidalgo of those with a lance in a shipyard, an old shield, a skinny nag and a running greyhound. He bordered on the age of our Hidalgo with 50 years, he was of strong complexion, dry of meats, thin of face, great early riser and friend of the hunt. He began to read books of chivalry, with such fondness and pleasure, that he almost completely forgot the exercise of hunting, and even the administration of his hacienda. Ultimately, he became so engrossed in his reading that he spent his nights reading from clear to clear, and the days from cloudy to cloudy, and so, from little sleep and much reading, his brain dried up, so that he came to lose his mind. And it was that it seemed convenient and necessary, both for the increase of his honor and for the service of his republic, to become a knight-errant. And the first thing he did was clean some weapons that had belonged to his great-grandparents. Out of cardboard he fashioned a half headpiece, which, fitted with the morion, made the appearance of a full headpiece. Putting iron bars on the inside, so that he was satisfied with his strength. He later went to see his nag, finally she came to call him Rocinante. Given a name, and to his liking, to his horse, he wanted to give it to himself, and in this thought he lasted another 8 days, and finally he came to be called Don Quixote. He must have been called Quixote, and not Quixote, as others wanted to say. But he added the name of his kingdom and homeland, by famous Hepila, and was called Amadis de Gaula, so he wanted, as a good gentleman, to add to his own the name of his own and be called Don Quixote de la Mancha. He gave himself to understand that he did not lack another thing but to look for a lady with whom he could fall in love, because the knight-errant without love was a tree without leaves and without fruit and a body without a soul. Wouldn't it be nice to have someone to send him an introduction to? She was called Aldonza Lorenzo, and it seemed to her that it would be good to give her the title of Lady of Thought. She came to call her Dulcinea del Toboso. Chapter 2, which deals with the first exit that the ingenious Don Quixote made from his land. One morning, before the day, which was one of the hottest days in July, he armed himself with all his weapons, climbed on Rocinante, wearing his ill-constructed headpiece, clutched his shield, took his lance, and, through the false door of a corral, he went out to the field with great happiness and joy to see how easily he had given beginning to his good wish. But he hardly saw himself in the field, when a terrible thought struck him. He had to carry white arms, as a new knight, without company in the shield, until by his effort he won it. He proposed to have himself knighted by the first one he met, in imitation of many others who did so. At nightfall he and his nag were found tired and starving. In this, it happened perhaps that a swineherd who was collecting a herd of pigs from some stubble, which, without pardon, that is what they are called, blew a horn, at whose signal they are collected, and at once Don Quixote was represented what wished, which was that some dwarf signaled his coming, and so, with strange contentment, he arrived at the inn, and the ladies, who, as they saw such a man coming, armed and with spear and shield, full of fear, were going to enter the inn, but Don Quixote, sensing his fear from his flight, raising his paper visor and uncovering his dry, dusty face, with a gentle demeanor and calm voice, told them, "Don't go." The language, not understood by the ladies, and the bad figure of our gentleman increased their laughter and his anger, and he would pass very far if the innkeeper did not come out at that point. A man who, being very fat, was very peaceful, said to him, "If your grace, Sir Knight, look for an inn, in addition to the bed, because in this inn there is none. Everything else will be found in it in great abundance." He then told the guest to take good care of his horse, because it was the best bread-eating piece in the world. The innkeeper looked at him, and he did not seem as good as Don Quixote said, not even half as good. The girls, who were not made to listen to such rhetoric, did not answer a word. They just asked him if he wanted to eat something. They set a table for him at the door of the inn, because of the cool weather, and the guest brought him a portion of the badly soaked and worse cooked codfish, and bread as black and filthy as his weapons, but it was a matter of great laughter to see him eat, because, as he had his helmet on and his visor raised, he could not put anything in his mouth with his hands if someone else did not give it to him and put it on, and so, one of those ladies served this purpose. But, when giving him a drink, it was not possible, nor would it be if the innkeeper did not pierce a cane, and put one end in his mouth, through the other he was pouring the wine, and all this he received patiently, in exchange for not breaking the headband. Being in this, perhaps a pig castrator came up for sale, and with this he considered his determination and departure well spent. But what annoyed him most was not being armed as a knight, because it seemed to him that he could not legitimately undertake any adventure without receiving the order of chivalry. Chapter 3, in which the graceful manner in which Don Quixote armed himself as a knight is recounted. And so, weary of this thought, he cut short his ventral and limited supper, which ended, he called the innkeeper, and, shutting himself up with him in the stable, he knelt before him, saying, I will never get up from where I am, brave knight, until your courtesy grants me a gift that I want to ask of you, which will result in your praise and in favor of the human race. The innkeeper had to tell him that he was giving him the gift he was asking for. I did not expect less from your great magnificence, my lord, Don Quixote answered, and so, I tell you that the gift that I have asked of you, and of your generosity has been granted to me, is that tomorrow on that day you will arm me as a knight, and tonight in the chapel of your castle I will watch over the arms, and tomorrow, as I have said, what I so desire will come true. The innkeeper, because he had something to laugh that night, decided to follow his humor, and so, he told her that he was very successful in what he wanted and asked for. He also told her that in that castle of his there was no chapel where he could watch the weapons, because it had been demolished to make it again, but that, in case of need, he knew that they could watch anywhere, and that tonight he could watch them in a courtyard of the castle, that in the morning, God being served, the due ceremonies would be performed, so that he would be armed as a knight, and such a knight that he could no longer be in the world. By the way, and found out that all the knights errant carried the bags well shod, for what could happen to them, and that they also wore shirts and a small chest full of ointments to heal the wounds they received. Don Quixote promised to do what he was advised with all punctuality. At this point one of the muleteers who were at the inn felt like going to give water to his train, and it was necessary to remove Don Quixote's weapons, which were on the pile, who, seeing him arrive, said aloud to him, O you, whoever you are, daring knight, who manages to touch the weapons of the most courageous errant who ever wore a sword. Look what you do and do not touch them, if you do not want to leave life in payment for your daring. The muleteer was not cured of these reasons by letting go of the shield. Don Quixote raised his lance with both hands and struck the muleteer so hard on the head with it that he knocked him to the ground, so battered that, if he were to second with another, he would not need a teacher to heal him. This done, he picked up his weapons and resumed pacing with the same repose as before. Shortly after, another arrived with the same intention of giving water to his mules, and, coming to remove the weapons to clear the pile, without speaking a word and without asking anyone for a favor, Don Quixote dropped the shield again and raised the spear again, and, without breaking it, made more than 3 the head of the second muleteer, because it was opened by 4. The companions of the wounded, who saw them as such, began to rain stones on Don Quixote from afar, who, as best he could, repaired himself with his shield, and did not dare move away from the pile so as not to abandon his weapons. But of you, coarse and lowly scoundrel, I don't pay any attention, come, and offend me as soon as you can, that you will see the payment you carry for your stupidity and too much. The innkeeper didn't like his guest's taunts, and decided to cut it short and give him the black order of chivalry later, before another misfortune happened. He ordered one of those ladies to put the sword on him, which she did with great ease and discretion. Giving him the sword, the good lady said, May God make your grace a very successful knight and give him success in battles. Don Quixote asked him what his name was, so that he would know from then on to whom he would be obliged by the favor received, because he thought to give him some part of the honor that would reach for the value of his arm. She replied very humbly that her name was La Tolosa, and that she was the daughter of a cobbler from Toledo who lived in the Sancho Bienaya shop. Don Quixote replied that, out of love for her, he should do her the mercy that from then on he should be called Don de Ella and she should be called Dona Tolosa. She promised him, and the other put on her spur, with which she had almost the same conversation as with the sword. She asked her name, and she said that her name was La Molinera, and that she was the daughter of an honest miller from Antiquera, she to whom Don Quixote also begged to be Don de Ella and be called Dona Molinera, offering her new services and favors. Thus, galloping and hurrying through the hitherto never seen ceremonies, she couldn't wait for Don Quixote to see himself on horseback and go out looking for adventures. Chapter 4. Of what happened to our gentleman when he left the sale. Remembering the advice of his guest about the precautions so necessary that he had to take with him, especially money and shirts, he decided to return to his house and accommodate everything, and esquire. He had not gone far, when it seemed to him that at his right hand, from the thickness of a forest that was there, delicate voices came out, like those of a person who was complaining. A few steps after he entered the forest, he saw a mare tied to an oak tree, and tied to another a boy, naked from the middle of his body up to the age of 15, who was the one who gave the voices, and not without cause, for he was giving him with a waistband 60 many lashes a well-built farmer, and each lashes accompanied him with a rebuke and advice. And, seeing what was happening, Don Quixote said in an angry voice, Discourteous knight, it seems bad to take you with whom you cannot defend, get on your horse and take your lance, which also had a lance leaning against the top where the mare was rented, and I will let you know that what you are doing is cowardly. Mr. Knight, this boy I am punishing is a servant of mine, who serves me to guard a herd of sheep that I have in these surroundings, which is so careless that every day I miss one. And, because I punish his negligence, or rascality, he says that I make him miserable, for not paying him the salary that I owe him, and in God and in my soul that lies. Are you lying in front of me, you vile villain? Don Quixote said. By the sun that shines on us, I am about to pass you from part to part with this spear. Pay him later without further reply, if not, by the God who governs us, let him conclude and annihilate you at this point. Untie it later. The farmer lowered his head and, without answering a word, untied his servant, to whom Don Quixote asked how much his master owed him. He said 9 months, at 7 reis each month. Don Quixote did the math and found that they amounted to 73 reals, 62, and told the farmer to pay them out immediately, if he did not want to die for it. The damages, gentlemen, in that I don't have money here. Andres, come with me to my house, and I'll pay you 1 real over another. Go with him, said the boy. But bad year. No, sir, not even for food, because, seeing himself alone, he flayed me like a Saint Bartholomew. He will not do such a thing, replied Don Quixote. And if he will swear to me by the law of chivalry that he has received, I will let him go free and assure his pay. Look, your worship, sir, what he says, said the boy, that my master is not a knight nor has he received any order of chivalry, who is Juan Halgado the Rich, the neighbor of the Quintanar 63. It matters little, answered Don Quixote, that Haldudos may be knights, how much more, that each one is the son of his works. That's true, said Andres, but this my master, of what works is he the son, since he denies me my wages and my sweat and work? Don Quixote said, give them in reals, that's what I'm happy with, and see that you fulfill it as you have sworn, if not, by the same oath I swear to come back to look for you and to punish you, and that I have to find you, even if you hide more than a lizard. And, saying this, he bit the Rocinante from him, and in a short space he departed from them. The farmer followed him with his eyes, and when he saw that he had passed through the forest and that he no longer appeared, he turned to his servant Andres and said, come here, my son, I want to pay you what I owe you, like that unmaker of grievances left me commanded. That's what I swear, said Andres, and how will your worship be successful in fulfilling the commandment of that good knight, may he live 1,000 years, that, according to him, he is brave and a good judge, Roque lives, that if he doesn't pay me, let him come back and do what he said. I swear it too, said the ploughman, but, as much as I love you, I want to increase the debt by increasing the pay. And, seizing him by the arm, he again tied him to the oak tree, where he gave him so many lashes that he left him for dead. Call, Mr. Andres, now, said the farmer to the grievancer, you will see how he does not dispute this one, although I think he's not quite finished, because I feel like skinning you alive, as you feared. But, in the end, he untied him and gave him leave to go look for his judge, to carry out the pronounced sentence. Andres broke down somewhat sullenly, swearing to go look for the brave Don Quixote de la Mancha and tell him point by point what had happened, and that he would pay him with the 70s. But, with all this, he broke down crying and his master kept laughing. Don Quixote discovered a large crowd of people, who, as it later became known, were merchants from Toledo who were going to Murcia to buy silk. Don Quixote raised his voice, and with an arrogant gesture said, everyone has a good time, if everyone doesn't confess that there is not every maiden in the world more beautiful than the Empress of La Mancha, the peerless Dulcinea del Toboso. Sir Knight, replied the merchant, I beg your worship, in the name of all these princes who are here, that, because we do not order our consciences by confessing something for us never seen or heard, and more being so to the detriment of the empresses and queens of Alcaria and Estremadura, may your grace show us a portrait of that lady, even if it is the size of a grain of wheat, that the ball will be pulled out by the thread, and we will be satisfied and safe with this, and your worship will be satisfied and paid, and I even believe that we are already so much on her side that, although her portrait shows us that she is blind in one eye and that vermilion and sulphur stone flow from the other, with all this, to please your grace, we will say everything in her favor. What would you like it doesn't flow, infamous scoundrel, responded Don Quixote, on fire with rage. It doesn't flow, I say, what you say, but amber and civet between cottons, and she is not one-eyed or hunchbacked, but straighter than a spindle from Guadarrama. But you will pay for the great blasphemy that you have said against such a beauty as my lady. And, saying this, he charged with the low spear against the one who had said it, with such fury and anger that, if good luck did not cause Rocinante to stumble and fall in the middle of the road, the daring merchant would have a hard time. Rocinante fell, and his master rolled a good piece across the field, and, wanting to get up, he never could, such an embarrassment was caused by the lance, shield, spurs and helmet, with the weight of the ancient weapons. And while he was struggling to get up and couldn't, he was saying, don't go, you cowardly people, captive people. A muleteer approached him, took the spear, and, after having broken it to pieces, with one of them he began to beat our Don Quixote so many times that, despite his weapons, he ground him like a cibera. The young man got tired, and the merchants continued on their way, carrying everything to tell about the poor beaten man. Which, after he found himself alone, returned to try if he could get up, but if he couldn't do it when sane and good, how could he do it, bruised and nearly undone? Chapter V. In which the narration of the misfortune of our gentleman is continued. Seeing, then, that indeed he could not move, he agreed to avail himself of his ordinary remedy, which was to think of some passage in his books, and his madness brought to his memory that one from Valdovinos and the Marquis of Mantua, when Carloto left him wounded on the mountain. And so, with signs of great feeling, he began to roll 72 on the ground and say with weakened breath the same thing that the wounded knight of the forest said, "Where are you, my lady, that my illness does not hurt you? Either you don't know, ma'am, or you're false and disloyal." And, in this way, the romance continued until those verses that say, "O noble Marquis of Mantua, my uncle and carnal lord." And as luck would have it, when he reached this verse, a farmer from the same place and his neighbor happened to pass by, coming from taking a load of wheat to the mill. The farmer was amazed hearing those nonsense, and, removing her visor, which had already been torn to pieces by the sticks, he cleaned her face, which was covered with dust, and he had barely cleaned him up, when he met him and said to him, "Señor Quijana, that's what he must have been called when he had reason and had not gone from calm hidalgo to knight errant." He tried to lift him off the ground, and not with a little effort he climbed on his ass, for seeming calmer cavalry. Arriving, then, the hour that seemed to him, he entered the town, and the house of Don Quixote, which he found all in an uproar, and the local priest and barber, who were great friends of Don Quixote, were there. Wretched me! I make myself understood, and this is the truth as I was born to die, that these accursed books of chivalry that he has and usually reads so regularly have turned his judgment, that now I remember hearing him say many times, talking among himself, that he wanted to become a knight errant and go in search of adventures in those worlds. Entrusted to Satan and Barabbas such books, which have thus spoiled the most delicate understanding that existed in all of La Mancha. But I am to blame for everything, that I did not notify your Mercedes of my lord uncle's nonsense. He said, "Here, everyone, I've been injured because of my horse. Take me to my bed and call, if possible, the wise Urganda, to heal and treat my wounds." They asked Don Quixote 1,000 questions, and he did not want to answer anything other than that they give him something to eat and let him sleep, which was what mattered most to him. This was done, and the priest informed the farmer very long of how he had found Don Quixote. He told her everything, with the nonsense that when he found him and when he brought him he had said, which was to make the lawyer more willing to do what he did the other day, which was to call his friend the barber Master Nicholas, with whom he came to Don Quixote's house. Chapter 6. Of the graceful and great scrutiny that the priest and the barber made in the bookstore of our ingenious Hidalgo, who was still sleeping. He asked the niece for the keys to the room where the books, authors of the damage, were kept, and she gave them to him very willingly. They found more than 100 bodies of large books, very well bound, and other small. There is no reason to forgive anyone, because they have all been the harmers. It would be better to throw them out of the windows into the patio, and make a pile of them and set them on fire, and if not, take them to the corral, and there the bonfire will be made, and the smoke will not offend. And the first one that Master Nicholas gave him in his hands was Los Cuatro de Amadis de Gaula, and the priest said, "This seems like something of a mystery, because, according to what I have heard, this book was the first of chivalry to be printed in Spain, and all the others have taken their beginning and origin from it, and so, it seems to me that, as the dogmatizer of such a bad sect, we owe him, without any excuse, to condemn the fire." "No, sir," said the barber, "I have also heard that it is the best of all the books of this kind that have been composed, and so, as unique in his art, he must be forgiven." "That is true," said the priest, "and for that reason he is given life for now. Let's see that other one next to him. He is," said the barber, "the Sergasta Esplandianati, legitimate son of Amadis de Gaula." "Well, really," said the priest, "the kindness of his father should not be worth the son." "Well, everyone go to the corral," said the priest. "That, in exchange for burning the Queen Pintaquiniestra, and the shepherd Darinal, and their eclogues, and the devilish and convoluted reasons of their author, I will burn with them the father who fathered me, if he walked in the figure of a knight errant." "This is," replied the barber, "Don Olivanti de Laura." "The author of that book," said the priest, "was the same one who composed Jardin de Flores, and in truth that he does not know how to determine which of the two books is more true, or, to put it better, less false. I can only say that this one will go to the corral for being crazy and arrogant. The Knight of the Cross. For a name as holy as this book has, ignorance of it could be forgiven, but it is also often said, behind the cross is the devil, go to the fire. This is mirror of chivalry. Poet Ludovico Ariosto, who, if I find him here, and who speaks in another language than his own, I will not respect him at all, but if he speaks his language, I will put him on my head." And here we would forgive the captain for not having brought him to Spain and made him a Castilian, that it took away much of its natural value, and the same will be done by all those who want to turn the verse books into another language, that, no matter how much care they put and ability they show, they will never reach the point they had at their first birth. Everything was confirmed by the barber, and he considered it a good thing and a very correct thing, for understanding that the priest was such a good Christian and such a friend of the truth, that he would not say anything else for all the truths in the world. Thus he will use mercy or justice with them, and in the meantime, keep them, compadre, in your house, but don't let anyone read them. And, not wanting to get tired of reading chivalric books, he ordered the housekeeper to take all the big ones and give them to the corral. Taking many together, he dropped one at the feet of the barber, who wanted to see whose it was, and saw that it said, "History of the famous knight tyrant the White." "Good God!" said the priest, giving a loud voice. "Let Tyrant El Blanco be here. Give it to me, compadre, that I realize that I have found in it a treasure of contentment and a mine of hobbies. Here is Don Quirilazon de Montalban, valiant knight, and his brother Tomas de Montalban, and the knight Fonseca, with the battle that the brave man from Tyrant waged with the Alano, and the wise cracks of the maiden Placer Demavida, with the love affairs and lies of the widow Reposada, and Mrs. Emperatriz, in love with Ippolito, her squire. I tell you the truth, Señor compadre, that, by its style, this is the best book in the world. Here the gentlemen eat and sleep and die in their beds, and make a will before their death, with other things that all the others books of this genre lack. With all that, I tell you that he deserved the one he composed for him, because he didn't do so many industrial nonsense, that they would throw him to the galleys for all the days of his life. Take him home and read to him, and you will see that what I have told you about him is true. But what shall we do with these little books that remain?" "These," said the priest, "must not be about chivalry, but about poetry." And opening one, he saw that it was La Diana, by Jorge de Montemayor, and he said, believing that all the others were of the same kind, "These don't deserve to be burned, like the others, because they don't do nor will they do the damage that cavalrymen have made, which are books of understanding without prejudice to third parties." "O Lord," said the niece, "your worship can well have them burned, reading these, if you fancy becoming a shepherd and wandering through the woods and meadows singing and playing, and, what would be worse, become a poet, which, they say, is incurable and catchy disease. We begin with La Diana de Montemayor. I am of the opinion that it should not be burned, but that everything that deals with the wise Felicia and the enchanted water, and almost all the major verses be removed, and the prose be left in good time, and the honor of being first in such books. The Diana called second of the Salmantino, and this, another that has the same name, whose author is Gilpolo." "Well, Salmantinos," replied the priest, "accompany and increase the number of those condemned to the corral, and Gilpolos be kept as if it were Apollo himself. The 10 books of Fortuna de Amor, a book as funny or as crazy as that has not been composed, and which, by its way, is the best and the most unique of those of this genre that have come to light in the world, and he who has not read him can realize that he has never read anything of pleasure. The Shepherd of Iberia, Nymphs of Henares and Disappointments of Jealousy." "Well, there's nothing else to do," said the priest, "but hand them over to the housekeeper's secular arm, and don't ask me why, it would never end." "The Shepherd of Philida." "It's not that shepherd," said the priest, "but a very discreet courtier, he be kept as a precious jewel. Treasure of several poems. Because the author of it is a friend of mine, and out of respect for other more heroic and lofty works that he has written. The Songbook of Lopez Maldonado. He is a great friend of mine, and his verses in his mouth admire whoever hears them, and such is the softness of the voice with which he sings them, that it enchants. La Galatea, by Miguel de Cervantes. That Cervantes has been a great friend of mine for many years, and I know that he is more versed in misfortunes than in verses. His book has some good invention, he proposes something, and does not conclude anything. It is necessary to wait for the second part that he promises, perhaps with the amendment he will fully attain the mercy that is now denied him, and, while this is seen, keep him a recluse in your inn." Chapter 7. From the second departure of our good knight Don Quixote de la Mancha. While doing this, Don Quixote began to shout, saying, "Here, here, brave knights, here it is necessary to show the strength of your valiant arms, that the courtiers carry the best of the tournament." By resorting to this noise and din, he did not go ahead with the scrutiny of the other remaining books, and so it is believed that they went to the fire, unseen and unheard. When they arrived at Don Quixote, he was already out of bed, and he continued in his voices and in his nonsense, stabbing and backhanding everywhere, being as awake as if he had never slept. "Hush your mercy, Señor compadre," said the priest, "for God will be served that luck changes, and that what is lost today will be won tomorrow, and take care of your grace to his health for now. It seems to me that he must be too tired, if he is not already ill." "Not wounded," said Don Quixote, "but bruised and broken, there is no doubt about it, because that bastard Don Roldan has beaten me to a pulp with the trunk of an oak, and all out of envy, because he sees that I'm just the opposite of his bravery. They did it this way, they fed him, and he fell asleep again, and they, amazed at his madness. That night she burned and burned the housekeeper how many books were in the corral and in the whole house, and such must have burned that they deserved to be kept in perpetual archives, but she did not allow her luck and the laziness of her scrutinizer, and thus, the proverb was fulfilled in them that sometimes the just pay for sinners. One of the remedies that the priest and the barber gave, at that time, for their friend's illness, was that they walled up the room with the books, because when he got up he would not find them. Perhaps by removing the cause, the effect would cease. And let them say that a charmer had taken them away, and the room and all, and so it was done with great haste. 2 days later Don Quixote got up, and the first thing he did was go to see his books, and, as he could not find the room where he had left him, he went from one place to another looking for him. "What room, or what nothing, is your grace looking for? There are no more rooms or books in this house, because everything was taken by the devil himself." "It wasn't a devil," replied the niece, "but an enchanter who came on a cloud one night, after the day your grace departed from here, said in a loud voice that, due to a secret enmity he had for the owner of those books and room, left the damage done in that house that would later be seen. He also said that his name was the wise Muniton." "Freston would say," said Don Quixote. "I don't know," answered the mistress, "if his name was Freston or Ferton, I only know that his name ended in ton." "That's right," said Don Quixote, "that he is a charming sage, a great enemy of mine, who has a grudge against me, because he knows from his arts and letters that I have to come, going through the times, to fight in a singular battle with a knight whom he favors, and I have to defeat him, without him being able to get in the way, and for this reason he tries to cause me all the troubles he can." "Who doubts that?" said the niece. "But, who gets your mercy, Mr. Uncle, into these brawls? Wouldn't it be better to be peaceful in his house and not go out into the world looking for trash bread, without considering that many go for wool and come back thrashed?" "Oh my niece," responded Don Quixote, "and how badly you are in the account. First that they trifle me, I will have peeled and removed the beards of as many as imagine touching me on the tip of a single hair." It is, then, the case that he spent 15 days at home very calm, without showing signs of wanting to second his first dalliances. At this time, he asked Don Quixote for a farmer who was a neighbor of his, a good man if this title can be given to someone who is poor, but with very little salt in his head. In short, he told him so much, persuaded him and promised him so much, that the poor villain determined to go out with him and serve as his squire. Don Quixote told him, among other things, that he willingly prepared to go with him, because perhaps an adventure could happen to him that would win, in take away those straws, some island, and leave him as governor of it. With these and other such promises, Sancho Panza, who was the farmer's name, left his wife and children and became his neighbor's squire. He then gave Don Quixote an order to look for money, and, selling one house and pawning another, and wasting them all, a reasonable amount arrived. He also made himself comfortable with a buckler, which he borrowed from a friend of his, and, equipping his broken headpiece as best he could, informed his squire Sancho of the day and time he planned to set out, so that he could accommodate himself to what he saw. What else was needed? Above all he charged her to carry saddlebags, and he said that he would take it, and that he was also thinking of taking a donkey that he had very good, because he was not used to walking much on foot. With the budget of accommodating him with more honorable cavalry when there was an opportunity for it, taking a horse from the first impolite knight he came across. He provided himself with shirts and other things that he could, according to the advice that the innkeeper had given him, all of which was done and fulfilled, without Panza saying goodbye to his children and wife, nor Don Quixote to his housekeeper and niece. One night they left the place without anyone seeing them. Sancho Panza rode on his donkey like a patriarch, with his saddlebags and his boot, and with a great desire to see himself already governor of the island that his master had promised him. "Look at your grace, knight-errant, don't forget what you have promised me about the island, that I will know how to govern it, however great it may be." To which Don Quixote replied, "You must know, friend Sancho Panza, that it was a widely used custom of ancient knights-errant to make governors of their squires of the islands or kingdoms that one, and I have determined that for me there is no lack of so grateful usage, before, I think to outdo myself in it, because they sometimes, and perhaps most, waited until their squires were old, and, after tired of serving and having bad days and worse nights, they gave them some title of count, or, at least, of marquis, from some valley or province from little more to less, but, if you live and I live, it could well be that before 6 days I won such a kingdom that I would have others adherent to it, who would come from mold to crown you as king of one of them." "You commend it to God, Sancho," answered Don Quixote, "for he will give you what suits him best, but do not discourage your spirit so much that you come to be content with less than being advanced." Chapter 8. Of the good success that the brave Don Quixote had in the frightening and never imagined adventure of the windmills, with other events worthy of happy remembrance. In this, they discovered 30 or 40 windmills that are in that field, and, just as Don Quixote saw them. You see there, friend Sancho Panza, where 30, or a few more, outrageous giants are discovered, with whom I plan to do battle and take everyone's lives, with whose spoils we will begin to enrich, that this is a good war, and it is a great service to God to remove such a bad seed from the face of the earth. What giants? Said Sancho Panza. Those you see there, replied his mistress, with long arms, which some of them usually have, almost 2 leagues long. Look, your grace, answered Sancho, those that appear there are not giants, but windmills, and what seem to be arms in them are the blades, which, turned by the wind, make the millstone move. It seems very well, responded Don Quixote, that you are not trained in this matter of adventures. They are giants, and if you are afraid, get out of there, and pray in the space that I am going to enter with them in a fierce and unequal battle. Well, even if you move more arms than the giant Briareus, you have to pay me. And, saying this, and commending himself wholeheartedly to his lady Dulcinea, asking her to help him in such a trance, well covered with his buckler, with his lance at the ready, he attacked Rocinante at full gallop and charged with the first windmill. That was ahead, and, giving him a lance on its blade, the wind turned it with such fury that he broke the lance to pieces, taking with him the horse and the knight, who went rolling badly battered through the field. Sancho came. Panza went to help him, as fast as his ass could run, and when he arrived he found that he couldn't move, such was the blow that Rocinante dealt him. Shut up, friend Sancho, responded Don Quixote, because the things of war, more than others, are subject to continuous change, the more so, that I think, and it is so true, that wise Freston who stole my room and the books has turned these giants into mills to take away the glory of their victory, such is the enmity he has for me, but, after all, their evil arts will have little power against the goodness of my sword. And, speaking in the past adventure, they followed the path of Porto Lapis. Said Sancho, I believe everything just as your grace says, but straighten up a bit, which seems to go to one side, and it must be from the grinding of the fall. That is the truth, answered Don Quixote, and if I do not complain about the pain, it is because it is not given to knights errant to complain about any wound, even if his guts spill out from it. Sancho told him to see that it was time to eat. His master replied that at that time he did not need it, let him eat when he wanted. That night they spent it among some trees, and from one of them Don Quixote tore a dry branch that could almost serve him as a spear, and he put in it the iron he had removed from the one that had broken. All that night Don Quixote did not sleep, thinking of his lady Dulcinea, to accommodate himself to what he had read in his books. Sancho Panza didn't spend it that way, since, as he had a full stomach, and not with chicory water, he took it all from a dream. They returned to their begun path of Porto Lapis, and at 3 in the morning they discovered him. Here, said Don Quixote, but warn me that, although you see me in the greatest dangers in the world, you must not put your hand to your sword to defend me, if you no longer see that those who offend me are scoundrels and base people, that in such a case you can help me, but if they were knights, it is in no way lawful for you or granted by the laws of chivalry that you help me, until you are knighted. It is true that, as far as defending my person is concerned, I will not have much regard for those laws, since the divine and human ones allow each one to defend himself from whoever wants to offend him. I say no less, replied Don Quixote, but, in helping me against knights, you must keep your natural impetus at bay. 2 friars of the order of San Benito appeared along the road, knights on 2 dromedaries, the 2 mules they came on were no smaller. They brought their cravings road and sun umbrellas. Behind them came a coach, with 4 or 5 horsemen accompanying it, and 2 muleteers on foot. In the car, as it later became known, was a Biscayan lady, who was going to Seville, where her husband was, who was going to the Indies with a very honorable position. The friars did not come with her, although they went the same way, more, just. Don Quixote spotted them when he said to his squire, either I am mistaken, or this must be the most famous adventure ever seen, because those black shapes that appear there must be, and are undoubtedly, some enchanters who have stolen some princess in that car, and it is necessary to undo this one-eyed with all my might. Look, sir, those are friars from San Benito, and the car must belong to some passing people. Look what I say to take a good look at what he does, lest the devil deceive you. I've already told you, Sancho, replied Don Quixote, that you know little about the infirmity of adventures, what I say is true, and now you will see it. And, saying this, he went ahead and stood in the middle of the road where the friars were coming. In a loud voice he said, devilish and enormous people, then leave immediately the high princesses that you have forced in that car, if not, get ready to receive prompt death, as a just punishment for your evil deeds. Sir Knight, we are not devilish or enormous, but 2 religious from San Benito who are on our way, and we don't know if there are any forced princesses in this car or not. There are no soft words for me, for I already know you, you filthy scoundrel, said Don Quixote. And, without waiting for another answer, he stung Rocinante and, lowering his lance, he attacked the first friar, with such fury and boldness that, if the friar did not let himself fall from the mule, he would make him come to the ground badly. And even badly injured, if he didn't drop dead. The second religious, who saw the way they treated his companion, put legs to the castle of his good mule, and began to run through that campaign, lighter than the wind itself. Sancho Panza, who saw the friar on the ground, slightly dismounting from his ass, attacked him and began to remove his robes. At this point 2 boys from the friars arrived and asked him why he was undressing him. Sancho replied that it fell to him legitimately, as spoils from the battle that his lord, Don Quixote, had won. Seeing that Don Quixote was already diverted from there, talking to those who were in the car, they attacked Sancho and hit him on the ground. They continued on their way, making more crosses than if they carried the devil on their backs. Don Quixote was, as has been said, talking to the lady in the carriage, telling her, "Your beauty, my lady, can make of her person whatever suits her best, because the pride of your robbers already lies on the ground. Knocked down by this my strong arm." All this that Don Quixote was saying was heard by one of the squires who accompanied the car, who was from Biscay. "Come on, gentlemen, don't walk, for the God who raised me, that, if you don't leave a car, that's how you kill yourself as you are there Biscayan. If you were a knight, as you are not, I would have already punished your foolishness and daring, captive creature. Not me, sir. I swear to God you lie as a Christian. If he throws and draws sword, the water how quickly you will see that the cat you carry." "Now you'll see," said Agrudges. Don Quixote responded. And, throwing the spear on the ground, he drew his sword and clutched his buckler, and attacked the Biscayan determined to take his life. The Biscayan could not do anything but draw the sword from him, but let him know that he found himself next to the car, from where he was able to take a pillow that served as a shield, and then they went towards each other, as if they were 2 deadly enemies. The Biscayan gave Don Quixote a great gash on the shoulder, above the buckler, which, if he gave it to him without defense, would open up to his waist. Don Quixote, who felt the weight of that outrageous blow, gave a loud voice, saying, "O lady of my soul, Dulcinea, flower of beauty, help this knight of yours, who, to satisfy your great kindness, in this rigorous trance is." Saying this, and tightening his sword, and covering himself well with his buckler, and attacking the Biscayan, all happened at one time, taking the determination to risk everything to that of a single blow. The Biscayan, who thus saw him coming against him, well understood his courage from his courage, and determined to do the same as Don Quixote, and so, he waited for her well covered with his pillow, unable to go around the mule to one side or the other, that now, out of sheer tiredness and not used to such childishness, he couldn't take a step. Chapter 9. Where the wonderful battle that the gallant Biscayan and the brave Manchego had is concluded and ends. And so it seems to me, then, when I could and should extend my pen in the praise of such a good gentleman, it seems that the industry spends it in silence, a thing poorly done and worse thought, there being and should be punctual historians, true and not at all passionate, and that neither interest nor fear, resentment nor fondness, do not make them twist from the path of truth, whose mother is history, emulator of time, repository of actions, witness of the past, example and warning of what is present, warning of what is to come. In short, its second part, following the translation, began in this way: set and raised high the cutting swords of the 2 brave and angry combatants. It seemed that they were threatening the sky, the earth, and the abyss, such was the boldness and continent they had. And the first to unload the blow was the choleric Biscayan, who was struck with such force and such fury that, unless his sword turned on the way, that single blow would be enough to put an end to their rigorous contest and to all the adventures of our knight, but good luck, which he had in store for greater things, twisted his opponent's sword, so that, although it hit him in the left shoulder, it did no other harm than to disarm him on that side, taking a large part of the road with him. Headpiece, with half of the ear, that all this with frightful ruin came to the ground, leaving him very battered. God help me, and who will be the one who can now recount the rage that entered the heart of our Manchego, seeing himself stop like that? Let's not say more, but it was in such a way that he rose again in his stirrups, and, tightening his sword in both hands, with such fury he unloaded on the Biscayan, hitting him squarely on the pillow and on the head, that without being part of such a good defense, as if a mountain were falling on him, he began to bleed from his nostrils, and from his mouth and from his ears, and gave signs of falling from the mule down, from where he fell, without a doubt, if he didn't hug himself with his neck, but, with all that, he took his feet out of the stirrups and then dropped his arms, and the mule, frightened by the terrible blow, began to run across the field, and after a few bucks he found his owner on the ground. Don Quixote, putting the point of his sword in his eyes, told him to surrender, if not, that he would cut off his head. The ladies of the car asked him with great care to do them such a great mercy and favor of sparing the life of that his squire. To which Don Quixote replied, with great tone and gravity, "By the way, beautiful ladies, I am very happy to do what you ask me, but it has to be with one condition and concert, and that is that this gentleman has to promise me to go to the place of Toboso and appear on my behalf before the unparalleled Dona Dulcinea, so that she can do whatever she wants with him." The fearful and disconsolate lady, without taking into account what Don Quixote was asking, and without asking who Dulcinea was, promised him that the squire would do everything that was ordered on her behalf. "Well, in faith of that word, I will not hurt him any more, since he had me well deserved." Chapter X. Of what happened best to Don Quixote with the Biscayan, and of the danger in which he found himself with a mob of Yanguises. Already at this time Sancho Panza had gotten up, somewhat mistreated by the friars' boys, and had been attentive to the battle of his lord Don Quixote. Seeing, then, that the brawl was over, and that his master was once again climbing on Rocinante, he managed to hold the stirrup for her. Note, brother Sancho, that this adventure and those like it are not adventures of islands, but of crossroads, in which the only gain is to get a broken head or one less ear. He entered through a forest that was there next to it. "What I beg of your grace is that you heal, because a lot of blood is coming out of that ear, that here I bring lint and a little white ointment in the saddle bags. For now, let's heal, because my ear hurts more than I would like. Your grace should note, Mr. Don Quixote, that if the knight complied with what he was ordered to go and appear before my lady Dulcinea del Toboso, he will have already complied with what he owed, and he does not deserve another penalty if he does not commit another crime. And thus, I annul the oath as regards taking new revenge on him, but do him and confirm him again to lead the life that I have said. But let's leave this for his time, and see if you have anything in those saddlebags that we can eat, because later we'll look for a castle where we'll stay tonight and make the bomb I told you about, because I vow to God that my ear is hurting a lot. Let me know, Sancho, that it is the honor of knights errant not to eat for a month, and, as long as they eat, whatever they find closest at hand, knights errant eat, if not by chance, and at some sumptuous banquets that are made for them, and the rest of the days are spent in flowers. That his most ordinary meal would be rustic viands." And, taking out, in this, what he said he had brought, the two ate in good peace and company. Next to some goatherds' huts, and so, they decided to spend it there. Chapter 11. Of what happened to Don Quixote with some goatherds. I want you to feel here by my side and in the company of these good people, and that you be the same thing with me, that I am your master and natural lord, that you eat on my plate and drink where I drink, because the same can be said of knight errantry as it is said of love, that all things are equal. Great mercy, said Sancho, but I know how to say to your grace that, if I had a good meal, I would eat it as well and better standing and alone as sitting next to an emperor. Although I welcome them, I renounce them from here to the end of the world. With all that, you have to sit down, because whoever humbles himself, God exalts him. And, seizing him by the arm, he forced him to sit down next to him. Don Quixote took longer to speak than to finish dinner, at the end of which, one of the goatherds said, "So that your worship can more truthfully say, Sir Knight Errant, that we entertain you with promptness and goodwill, we want to give you solace and content with having a companion of ours who does not sing. It will take a long time to be here." And, without asking any more, he sat down on the trunk of a pollard oak, and, tempering his rebeck, from then on, with very good grace, he began to sing. Although Don Quixote begged him to sing something else, Sancho Panza did not consent, because he was more to sleep than to listen to songs. "But, with all this, it would be good, Sancho, if you heal this ear again, which is hurting me more than it needs to." Chapter 12. Of what a goatherd told those who were with Don Quixote. While this was being done, another young man arrived from those who brought them supplies from the village, and said, "Well, you know," continued the young man, "that famous student pastor named Grisostomo died this morning." And Don Quixote begged Pedro to tell him which dead man was and which shepherdess that was, to which Pedro replied that what he knew was that the dead man was a rich son of a bitch, a resident of a place that was in those mountains, with the opinion of a very wise and well-read man. Already at this time the father of our Grisostomo was dead, and he was inherited in a large amount of property, both in furniture and in roots, and in no small amount of cattle. In our village there was a farmer even richer than Grisostomo's father, whose name was Guillermo, and to whom God gave, in addition to the many and great riches, a daughter, from whose childbirth his mother died, who was the most honored woman who was in all these contours. In spite of the death of such a good woman, her husband, Guillermo, died, leaving her daughter, Marcella, a girl, and rich, in the power of an uncle of hers, a priest and beneficiary in our place. When she reached the age of 14 to 15, no one looked at her that she did not bless God, how beautiful he had raised her, and most of her fell in love and lost for her. Her uncle kept it very modestly and with great seclusion, But, with all this, the fame of her great beauty spread so that, both for her and for her many riches, not only of those of our people, but of those of many leagues around, and of the best of them, he was begged, requested, and importunate by his uncle to give her to him as a wife. But he, who is rightly a good Christian, although he wanted to marry her off later, as well as the old way, did not want to do it without her consent, without having an eye on the profit and farming that having the girl's farm offered him, dilating your marriage. And in the rest you will know that, although the uncle proposed to the niece and told her the qualities of each one in particular, of the many who asked her for a wife, begging her to marry and choose as she liked, she never answered anything other than that at that time he did not want to get married. With these that she gave, apparently just excuses, her uncle stopped bothering her, and he waited until she was a little older and she knew how to choose her company to her liking. Because he said, and he said very well, that parents should not give their children state against his will. One day the finicky Marcella turned into a shepherdess, and, without her uncle being part of it or all the people in town, who discouraged her, she decided to go to the field with the other girls of the place, and decided to keep her own cattle. And, just as she went out in public and her beauty was revealed, I won't be able to tell you how many rich youths, hidalgos, and farmers have taken on Grisostomo's suit and are going around ruining her in those fields. One of which, as has already been said, was our deceased, of whom they said that he stopped loving her, and adored her. That of all those who serve her and solicit none of her has been praised, nor can truly be praised, that she has given him some small hope of achieving her desire. Because her affability and her beauty attract the hearts of those who treat her to serve her and love her, but her disdain and her disappointment lead them to terms of despair, and so they don't know what to say about her, except to call her cruel and ungrateful. And all of us who know her are waiting for her to stop her arrogance, and who will be the lucky one who will come to master such a terrible condition and enjoy such extreme beauty. And so, I advise you, sir, that you do not fail to find yourselves tomorrow at his funeral. And, for now, it will be good that you are going to sleep under a roof, because the serene could damage your wound. And all the rest of the night was spent in memories of his wife Dulcinea, in imitation of Marcella's lovers. Chapter 13. Where the story of the shepherdess Marcella ends, with other events. But as soon as the day began to show on the eastern balconies, 5 of the 6 goatherds got up and went to wake up Don Quixote, and to tell him if he was still planning to go see the famous burial of Grisostomo. According to these shepherds they have told us strange things, both of the dead shepherd and of the homicidal shepherdess. The annals and histories of England, where the famous deeds of King Arthur are dealt with, whom we continuously call King Arthur in our Castilian romance, of whom it is an ancient and common tradition throughout that kingdom of Great Britain that this king did not die, but, by the art of enchantment, he became a raven, and that, as time goes on, he will return to reign and collect his kingdom and scepter, on whose account will it not be proved that from that time to this there has been no dead Englishman any raven? For in the time of this good king, that famous chivalric order of the Knights of the Round Table was instituted. The knights errant, and it is that, when they are faced with the occasion of undertaking a great and dangerous adventure, in which there is a clear danger of losing their lives, never in that moment of undertaking do they remember to commend themselves to God. It was better that the words that he spent in the race entrusting himself to his lady were spent on what he owed and was obliged to as a Christian. I say that it cannot be that there is a knight errant without a lady, because it is as proper and as natural for such to be in love as it is for the sky to have stars. He would not be considered a legitimate knight, but a bastard. Even the goatherds and shepherds themselves knew the excessive lack of judgment of our Don Quixote. Only Sancho Panza thought that what I love about him said was true, knowing who he was and having known him since his birth. They were going through these talks when they saw that, due to the break that 2 high mountains made, up to 20 shepherds came down. Those who come there are the ones who bring the body of Grisostomo, and the foot of that mountain is the place where he ordered them to bury him. And then Don Quixote and those who came with him began to look at the litters, and on them they saw a dead body covered with flowers, dressed as a shepherd, apparently 30 years old, and, though dead, he showed that alive he had been handsome in face and gallant in disposition. Around him he had on the same litter some books and many papers, open and closed. This is it, answered Ambrosio, that many times in it my unfortunate friend told me the story of his misfortune. There he told me that he saw that mortal enemy of the human lineage for the first time, and there it was also where the first time he declared his thoughts to her, as honest as in love, and there it was the last time where Marcella ended up disillusioning and disdaining him, so that he put an end to the tragedy of his miserable life. Before, by giving life to these papers, make Marcella's cruelty always have it, so that it may serve as an example, in times to come, to the living, so that they turn away and flee from falling into such cliffs. I already know, and those of us who come here, the story of your lover and desperate friend, and we know your friendship, and the occasion of his death, and what he left behind at the end of his life. Chapter 14. Where the desperate verses of the late pastor are placed, with other unexpected events. The song by Grisostomo seemed good to those who had listened to it, since the one who read it said that it did not seem to him that it conformed to the relationship that he had heard of Marcella's modesty and kindness, because in it Grisostomo complained of jealousy, suspicion, and absence, all to the detriment of Marcella's good credit and reputation. Este destacado y scribio esta canciones de asunta Marcella, de quien el se había ausentado por su voluntad, por veres y usaba con el la ausencia de sus ordinarios fueros. Así le fatigaban a Grisostomo los celos imaginados y las sospechas temidas como si fueran verdaderas. Y con esto queda en su punto la verdad que la fama pregona de la bondad de Marcella, la cual, fuera de ser cruel, y un poco arrogante y un mucho destinosa, la mesma envidia ni deb ni puede poner la falta alguna. Y fuque, por cima de la pena donde se cavaba la sepultura, pereció la pastora Marcella. Dinos presto a lo que vienes, o que es aquello de que más gustas. No vengo, sino a volver por mí misma, y a dar a entender que en fuera de razón van todos aquellos que de sus penas y de la muerte de Grisostomo me culpan. Hit som el cielo, según vosotros decís, hermosa, y de tal manera que, sin ser poderosos a otra cosa, a que me amis os mueve mi hermosura, y, por el amor que me mostra, decís, y encoréis, que esté yo obligada a amaros. Yo conozco, con el natural entendimiento que Dios me ha dado, que todo lo hermoso es amable, mas no alcanzo que, por razón de ser amado, esté obligado lo que es amado por hermoso a amar a quien le ame. Y mas, que podría acontecer que el amador de lo hermoso fuese feo, y, siendo lo feo digno de ser aborrecido, sea muy mal el deser quirot por hermosa, hasme de amar enqui si feo. Pero, puesto caso que corren igualmente las hermosuras, no por eso han de correr iguales los deseos, que no todas hermosuras enamoran, que algunas alegran la vista y no rinden la voluntad, que si todas las bellezas enamoracen y rendizan, sería un andar las voluntades confusas y descaminadas, sin saber en cuál habían de parar, porque, siendo infinitos los sujetos hermosos, infinitos habían de ser los deseos. Y, según yo he oído decir, el verdadero amor no se divide, y ha de ser voluntario, y no forzoso. Siendo esto así, como yo creo que lo es, porque queréis que rinda mi voluntad por fuerza, obligado no más de que decís que me queréis bien? Si no, decidme, si como el cielo me hizo hermosa mi hisirofía, fuera justo que me quedara de vosotros porque no me amabadís. Cuanto más, que habéis de considerar que yo no escogí la hermosura que tengo, que, tal cual es, el cielo me la dio de gracia, sin yo pedía ni escogela. Y, así como la víbora no mira ser culpada por la ponzonación, puesto que con el amada, por habersela dado naturaleza, tampoco yo merezco ser reprehendida por ser hermosa, que la hermosura en la mujer honesta es como el fuego apartado o como la espada aguda, que en el quema en el acorda a quien elos no se acerca. La honra y las virtudes son adornos del alma, sin las cuales el cuerpo, aunque lo si, no debe de parecer hermoso. Pues si la honestidad es una de las virtudes que el cuerpo y el alma más adornan y hermosean, porque la ha de perder la que es amada por hermosa, por corresponder a la intención de aquel que, por solo su gusto, con todas sus fuerzas y industrias procura que la pierda. Yo nací libre, y para poder vivir libre escogí la soledad de los campos. Los árboles destas montanas son mi compañía, las claras aguas de estos arroyos mis espejos, con los árboles y con las aguas comunico mis pensamientos y hermosura. Fuego soy apartado y espada puesta lejos. A los que he enamorado con la vista he desengañado con las palabras. Y los deseos se sustentan con esperanzas, no habiendo yo dado alguna a Grisostomo ni otro alguno, el fin de ninguno de los bienes puede decir que antes el imado soporfia que mi crueldad. Y me hace cargo que eran honestos sus pensamientos, y que por esto estaba obligada a corresponder ellos, digo que, cuando en ese mismo lugar donde ahora se cava su sepultura me descubrió la bondad de su intención, dijo que la mía era vivir en perpetua soledad, y de que sola la tierra gozes el fruto de mi recogimiento y los despojos de mi hermosura, con todo este desengaño, quiso porfiar contra la esperanza y navega contra el viento, que mucho que se enegas en la mitad del golfo de su desatino. Siole entretovera, fuera falsa, sile contentera, hisira contra mi mejor intention y presupuesto. Porfio desengañado, desespero sin ser aborrecido, morad ahora sira razón que de supina me de mi la culpa. Quejis el enganado, desesperis aquel a quien le faltaran las prometidas esperanzas, Confis el que yo lamare, ufanes el que yo admitiere, pero no me la mi cruel ni homicida aquel quien yo no permetto, ingano, lamo ni admito. Heaven has so far not wanted me to love by destiny, and the thought that I love by choice is excused. This general disappointment serves each one of those who request me for their particular benefit, and let it be understood, from now on, that if someone dies for me, he does not die of jealousy or unhappiness, because whoever loves no one should be jealous, that disappointments should not be taken into account as disdains. He who calls me wild beast and basilisk, leave me as a harmful and bad thing, whoever calls me ungrateful, do not serve me, he who does not know me, who cruel, he does not follow me, that this beast, this basilisk, this ungrateful, this cruel and this unknown, nor will he seek them, serve them, know them, or follow them in any way. That if Chrysostomo was killed by his impatience and his throne desire, why should my honest behavior and modesty be blamed? If I keep my cleanliness with the company of trees, why should he want me to lose it who wants me to have it with men? I, as you know, have my own riches and do not covet those of others, I have a free condition and I don't like to subject myself, I neither love nor hate anyone. I do not deceive this one or request that one, nor tease with one nor amuse myself with the other. The honest conversation of the girls from these villages and the care of my goats entertains me. These mountains have my desires as an end, and if they leave here, it is to contemplate the beauty of the sky, steps with which the soul walks to its first abode. And saying this, without wanting to hear any answer, he turned his back and entered the most closed part of a mountain that was nearby, leaving everyone who was there amazed at both his discretion and his beauty. And some showed signs of wanting to follow her. When Don Quixote saw this, it seemed to him that it was good to use his cavalry there, helping the needy maidens, putting his hand on the hilt of his sword, in loud and intelligible voices, he said, "No person, of any state and condition whoever dares to follow the beautiful Marcella, under penalty of falling into my furious indignation. She has shown with clear and sufficient reasons how little or no fault she has had in Chrysostomo's death, and how oblivious she is to condescending to the wishes of any of her lovers, for whose cause it is fair that, instead of being followed and persecuted, be honored and esteemed of all the good in the world, because it shows that in it she is the only one who lives with such honest intention." None of the shepherds moved away, and giving all their condolences to his friend Ambrosio, they said goodbye to him. Vivaldo and his companion did the same, and Don Quixote said goodbye to his guests and the travelers, who begged him to come with them to Seville, since it was such a comfortable place to find adventures. Don Quixote thanked them for the warning and for the spirit they showed in doing him favor, and said that at that time he did not want to and should not go to Seville, until he had stripped all those saws of rogue thieves, who were known to be full of them. Don Quixote determined to go find the shepherdess Marcella and offer her everything he could in her service. But it did not suit him as he thought. Chapter 15. Where the unfortunate adventure that Don Quixote ran into when he ran into some heartless Yanguises is told. He and his squire entered the same forest where they saw that the shepherdess Marcella had entered. It happened, then, that Rocinante had the desire to rejoice with the facilities. Seeing the force that was being applied to his mares, the muleteers came with stakes, and they gave him so many sticks that they knocked him down badly on the ground. By this time Don Quixote and Sancho, who had seen Rocinante's beating, arrived panting, and Don Quixote said to Sancho, "As far as I can see, friend Sancho, these aren't knights, but coarse and lowly people." And, without making any more speeches, he reached for his sword and attacked the Galicians, and Sancho Panza did the same, incited and moved by the example of his master. The Galicians, who saw themselves mistreated by those two men alone, being so many of them, went to their stakes, and, taking the two in the middle, began to attack them with great zeal and vehemence. To Don Quixote, without being worth his skill and good spirits, and it was his fate that he should come to fall at the feet of Rocinante, who had not yet got up. Seeing, then, the bad errand they had done, as quickly as they could, they loaded their train and continued on their way, leaving the two adventurers with a bad appearance and a worse mood. Don Quixote, "But I am to blame for everything, that I should not lay hands on the sword against men who were not armed knights like me, and so, I believe that, in pain of having passed the laws of chivalry, the god of battles has allowed me to be given this punishment. And thus, it is necessary that the new possessor has understanding to know how to govern, and courage to offend and defend himself in any event. That if the shoemaker hits another with the last he has in his hand, since it is really made of wood, it will not be said that the one he hit with it is beaten. The wounds that are received in battles give honor rather than take it away." Resolutely, Sancho settled Don Quixote on the donkey and put Rocinante on a leash, and, leading the ass on a halter, he headed, more or less, towards where it seemed to him that the royal road might be. And luck, that things went from good to better for him, when he paved the way for him, in which he discovered an inlet that, in spite of himself and Don Quixote's liking, had to be a castle. That took place, without finishing it, to reach it, in which Sancho entered, without further investigation, with all his train. Chapter 16. Of what happened to the ingenious Hidalgo in the inn that he imagined to be a castle. The innkeeper, who saw Don Quixote impaled on the donkey, asked Sancho what was wrong with him. She had the innkeeper for a wife, not in the condition that those of such treatment usually have, because naturally she was charitable and she grieved for the calamities of her neighbors, and so, he then went to cure Don Quixote and made one of his daughters, a maiden, a girl and of very good appearance, help her cure her guest. She also served in the sale, an Asturian girl, wide face, flat neck, blunt nose, one eye blind and the other not very healthy. It is true that the gallantry of her body made up for her other faults, she was not 7 palms tall from head to toe, and her shoulders, which somewhat carried her, made her look at the ground more than usual. That she wanted. That way, replied the landlady, you should have fallen too. I didn't fall, said Sancho Panza, but from the shock I took at seeing my master fall, my body aches so much that it seems to me that they have given me 1,000 blows. That may well be it, said the maiden, that many times it has happened to me to dream that I fell from a tower below and that I never quite reached the ground, and, when I awoke from the dream, to find myself as bruised and broken as if she had really fallen. I'm just telling you that I'll have eternally written in my memory the service you've done me, to thank you while life lasts me, and it would please the high heavens that love did not have me so surrendered and so subject to its laws, and the eyes of that beautiful ingrate that I say between my teeth, that the beautiful maiden were lords of my freedom. And the Asturian Maritornes healed Sancho, who needed it no less than he loved her. The muleteer had arranged with her that they would rejoice together that night, and she had given him her word that, when the guests were calm and her master was asleep, she would go to look for him and satisfy his pleasure as soon as he ordered it. And tell this good girl that she never gave such words that she did not fulfill them, even if she gave them on a mountain and without any witness, because she presumed to be a noblewoman, and she had no affront to be in that exercise of serving in her sale, because she said that misfortunes and bad events of hers had brought her to that state of hers. And it was that he imagined having arrived at a famous castle which, as has been said, castles were in his opinion all the inns where he stayed, and that the daughter of the innkeeper was the daughter of the lord of the castle, who, defeated by his courtesy, he had fallen in love with him and promised that that night, in the absence of his parents, he would come to lie with him a good piece, and, having all this chimera, which he had fabricated, as firm and valid, he began to worry and to think about the dangerous trance in which his honesty would be seen, and he proposed in his heart not to commit treachery against his lady Dulcinea del Toboso, although Queen Ginebra herself with her lady Quintanona stood before her. Thinking, then, about these nonsense, the time and hour arrived which for him was shortened for the arrival of the Asturian. But he barely got to the door when Don Quixote felt her, and, sitting up in bed, despite her bizarreness and pain in her ribs, he stretched out his arms to receive her beautiful maiden. The Asturian, who, all collected and silent, went with her hands in front looking for her beloved, ran into the arms of Don Quixote, who seized her tightly by one wrist and, pulling her towards him, without her daring to speak a word, made him sit on the bed. She then felt her shirt, and, although it was made of sackcloth, it seemed to him to be made of the finest and thin cloth. She wore glass beads on her wrists, but he caught glimpses of precious oriental pearls. And her breath, which undoubtedly smelled of cold, stale salad, seemed to him to expel a soft, aromatic odor from her mouth. And the blindness of the poor Hidalgo was so great that touch, or breath, or other things that the good maiden brought with her, did not disappoint him, which could make someone who was not a muleteer vomit, before, it seemed to him that he held the goddess of beauty in his arms. And, holding her tightly, in a low, loving voice, he began to tell her. I would like to be in terms, beautiful and tall lady, of being able to pay such a mercy as the one that with the sight of your great beauty you have granted me, but fortune, who does not tire of persecuting the good, has wanted to put me in this bed, where I lie so bruised and broken that, even if I wanted to satisfy yours, it was impossible. And more, that another greater impossibility is added to this, which is the promised faith that I have given to the incomparable Dulcinea del Toboso, the only lady of my most hidden thoughts, that if this were not involved, I would not be such a bloody gentleman that I would let the fortunate occasion on which your great kindness has put me pass by. She was terribly distressed and perspiring from seeing herself so clinging to Don Quixote, and without understanding or paying attention to the reasons she was telling her, she tried, without speaking a word, to free herself. The good muleteer, who had been awakened by her bad desires, from the point that he entered her coima through the door, felt it. He was attentively listening to everything that Don Quixote said, and, jealous that the Asturian woman had not spoken to him for someone else, he went closer to Don Quixote's bed, and stayed until he saw where those reasons ended, that he could not to understand. But, as he saw that the girl was struggling to free herself and Don Quixote was working for her, the mockery seemed bad to him. He raised his arm high and unloaded such a terrible fist on the narrow jaws of the enamored knight, that his entire mouth was bathed in blood, and, not content with this, he climbed on top of her ribs, and with his feet more than a trot, he walked them all from end to end. The bed, which was a little flimsy and had no firm foundations, not being able to withstand the addition of the muleteer, hit the ground, to whose great noise the innkeeper woke up, and then imagined that they must be Maritorni's quarrels, because, having called out, he did not answer. With this suspicion he got up, and, lighting a lamp, he went to where he had felt the hair. The girl, seeing that her master came from her, and that she was in a terrible condition, all timid and agitated, took refuge in the bed of Sancho Panza, who was still sleeping, and there she curled up and curled up. The innkeeper came in saying, "Where are you, whore? Surely these are your things." At this, Sancho woke up, and, feeling that lump almost on top of him, he thought he had the nightmare, and he began to punch here and there, and among others he hit Maritornes with I don't know how many, who, feeling the pain, rolling honesty, he gave Sancho the return with so many that, to his spite, he deprived him of sleep, seeing himself being treated in that manner and not knowing by whom. Rising as best he could, he embraced Maritornes, and between the two they began the most bitter and amusing skirmish in the world. Seeing, then, the muleteer, by the light of the innkeeper's lamp, which was his lady, leaving Don Quixote, he went to give her the necessary help. The innkeeper did the same, but with a different intention, because he went to punish the girl, doubtless believing that she alone was the occasion for all that harmony. And just as they say, the cat after a while, the mouse to the rope to the stick, the muleteer gave to Sancho, Sancho to the girl to him, the innkeeper to the girl, and they all mended with such haste that they did not give themselves a point of rest, and it was a good thing that the innkeeper's lamp went out, and, as they were dark, they all gave themselves up so ruthlessly that, wherever they put their hands, they left nothing healthy. Perhaps a gang member of what they call the Santa Hermandad Vieja de Toledo was staying at the inn that night. Hold to justice. Have the Holy Brotherhood. And the first he bumped into was Don Quixote, who had been stabbed, who was on his collapsed bed, stretched out on his back, senseless, and, tentatively putting his hand to his beard, kept saying, "Please justice." But, seeing that the one he was holding did not stir or move, he gave himself to understand that he was dead, and that those who were inside were his killers, and with this suspicion he strengthened his voice, saying, "Close the door of the cell. Look, don't let anyone go, they've killed a man here." This voice startled everyone, and each one stopped the quarrel to the extent that the voice took him. The innkeeper retired to his room, the muleteer to his enjalmis, the girl to his ranch, only the unfortunate Don Quixote and Sancho could not move from where they were. At this the squadron let go of Don Quixote's beard, and went out to look for light to search for and apprehend the delinquents, but he did not find it, because the landlord, from industry, had killed the lamp when he retired to his room, and it was forced to go to the fireplace, where, with much work and time, the gang member lit another lamp. Chapter 17. In which the innumerable labors that the brave Don Quixote and his good squire Sancho Panza went through in the inn that, due to his misfortune, he thought was a castle are continued. He had already returned at this time from his paroxysm Don Quixote, and, with the same tone of voice with which the day before he had called his squire. "Sancho, it's not because of that," answered Sancho, "but because I'm an enemy of keeping things too much, and I wouldn't want them to rot from being put away." "Be it for what it may be," said Don Quixote, "you must know that tonight one of the strangest adventures that I will know how to praise has happened to me, and, by telling you briefly, you will know that recently the daughter of the lord of this castle came to me, who is the most handsome and beautiful maiden that can be found in much of the land. What could she tell you about the adornment of her person? What of her dashing understanding? What of other hidden things, that, to keep the faith that I owe to my lady Dulcinea del Toboso, I will let pass intact and in silence? I just want to tell you that, heaven being envious of so much good fortune had put in my hands, and later it ground me in such a way that I am worse off than yesterday when the Galicians, who, due to too much Rocinante, did us the wrong they you know. Even your grace thank goodness, because you had in your hands that incomparable beauty you said, but what did I have but the worst blows I planned to receive in my whole life? Unfortunate for me and for the mother who gave birth to me, for I am not a knight-errant, nor do I ever intend to be, and most of all misdeeds fit me." "Then are you beaten up too?" Don Quixote responded. "Didn't I say yes, despite my lineage?" Sancho said. "Don't be embarrassed, friend," said Don Quixote, "for now I will make the precious balm with which we will heal in the twinkling of an eye." He ended up lighting the lamp for the gang member, and he went in to see who he thought was dead. It is true that Don Quixote was still on his back, unable to move, due to being crushed and plastered. The squadron came up to him and said, "Well, how are you doing, good man?" "I would speak rather a servant," responded Don Quixote, "if it were you. Is it used in this land to speak of bad luck to knights errant, fool?" The squadron, who saw himself treated so badly by a man with such a bad appearance, could not bear it, and, raising the oil lamp with all its oil, hit Don Quixote with it on the head, so that he left him very badly decapitated. And, as everything was dark, he left immediately. And Sancho Panza said, "Without a doubt, sir, this is the enchanted Moor, and he must keep the treasure for others, and for us he only keeps the fists and the candlesticks." "That's right," responded Don Quixote, "and we must not pay attention to these enchanted things, nor is there any reason to take anger with them, that, since they are invisible and fantastic, we will not find anyone to take revenge on, even if we try harder. Get up, Sancho, if you can, and call the warden of this fortress, and see that he gives me a little oil, wine, salt, and rosemary to make the salutary balm." The innkeeper provided him with whatever he wanted, and Sancho took it to Don Quixote, who was with his head in his hands, complaining of the pain from the lamp, which had done him no more harm than raising two slightly enlarged bumps, and what he thought was blood was nothing more than sweat. He was sweating with the anguish of the past storm. In resolution, he took the simple ones from him, of which he made a compound, mixing them all and cooking them a good space, until they seemed to him to be just right for him. And then he said over the alcoza more than 80 paternosters and as many Hail Marys, salves and creeds, and each word was accompanied by a cross, as a blessing. This done, he himself then wished to experience the virtue of that precious balm that he imagined, and so, he drank, from what he could not fit in the alcoza and remained in the pot where he had cooked, almost half an azumbre, and he hardly finished drinking it, when he began to vomit so that there was nothing left in his stomach, and with the ass and agitation of vomiting he gave him a copious sweat, for which he ordered them to wrap him up and leave him alone. They did so, and he fell asleep for more than 3 hours, at the end of which he woke up and felt very relieved of his body, and in such a better way of his brokenness that he considered himself healed, and he truly believed that he had been right with the Firaber's balm, and that with that remedy he could undertake from then on, without any fear, any ruins, battles, and brawls, however dangerous they might be. Sancho Panza begged him to give him what was left in the pot, the case being that poor Sancho's stomach must not have been as delicate as his master's, and so, first he vomited, they gave him as many asses and hesitations, with so many sweats and fainting spells that he thought well and truly that his last hour had come, and, seeing himself so afflicted and distraught, he cursed the salve and the thief who had given it to him. "I believe, Sancho, that all this evil comes from not being knighted, because I believe that this liquor should not benefit those who are not." "If your worship knew that," replied Sancho, "too bad for me and all my relatives. Why did you allow me to like it?" This storm and misfortune lasted almost 2 hours, at the end of which he was not left as his master, but so beaten and broken that he could not have himself. But Don Quixote, who, as has been said, felt relieved and healthy, wanted to leave later to seek adventures. And so, forced by this desire, he himself saddled Rocinante and saddled the donkey of his squire, whom he also helped to dress and get on the donkey. When the two of them were on horseback, stationed at the door of the inn, he called the innkeeper, and in a very calm and serious voice he said to him, "Many and very great are the favors, Mr. Alcalde, that I have received in this castle of yours, and I am obliged to thank you all the days of my life. I only need your grace to pay me for the expense you have incurred tonight in the sale, as well as for the straw and barley of your 2 beasts, as well as for dinner and beds." "I have lived up to here in deception," responded Don Quixote, "for in truth I thought it was a castle, and not a bad one, but, since it is so that it is not a castle but a sale, what can be done for now is that you forgive the payment, that I cannot contravene the order of the knights errant, of whom I know true, without until now having read something to the contrary, that they never paid lodging or anything else for sale where they were, because they are owed by law and by law any good. Welcome that was given to them." "I have little to do with that," answered the innkeeper. "Pay me what is owed to me, and let's stop with stories or chivalry." "You are a fool and a bad innkeeper," replied Don Quixote. And, putting legs on the Rocinante and interfering with his lance, he left the inn without anyone stopping him, and he, without looking to see if his squire was following him, walked a long way. The innkeeper, who saw him go and did not pay him, went to collect from Sancho Panza, who said that, since his mistress had not wanted to pay, he would not pay either. It was the bad luck of the unfortunate Sancho that, among the people who were at the inn, there were cheerful, well-intentioned, mischievous, and playful people, who, almost as if instigated and moved by the same spirit, came to Sancho, and, dismounting him from the donkey, one of them entered through the blanket of the guest's bed, and, throwing him on it, they raised their eyes and saw that the ceiling was somewhat lower than what they had needed for their work, and they decided to go out to the corral, which the sky was the limit. And there, with Sancho placed in the middle of the blanket, they began to lift him up and enjoy himself with him as with a dog at Shrovetide. The voices that the miserable Mantetto gave were so many that they reached the ears of his mistress. Turning the reins, he saw the bad game that was being played on his squire. He tried to climb from the horse to the railings, but he was so bruised and broken that he couldn't even get down, and so, From on top of the horse, he began to say so many insults to those who were scolding Sancho, that it is not possible to hit a little writing, but for this they did not stop their laughter and his work, nor did the flying Sancho stop his complaints, mixed now with threats, now with entreaties, but everything was of little use, nor did he take advantage of it. Until they left him out of sheer tiredness. They brought him his donkey there, and, raising him on top of him, they wrapped him in his coat. And the compassionate Maritornes, seeing him so tired, thought it would be good to help him with a jug of water, and so it was brought from the well, because it was colder. Sancho took it, and taking it to his mouth, he stopped at the voices that his master gave him, saying, "Son Sancho, don't drink water. Son, don't drink it, it will kill you. You see? Here I have the most holy balm, and I showed him the concoction of the concoction, that with 2 drops that you drink from it you will heal without a doubt. By luck, has your grace forgotten how I'm not a knight, or do you want me to finish vomiting up the entrails that were left over from last night? Put your booze to hell with you and leave it to me." And finishing saying this and starting to drink everything was one, but, as at the first sip he saw that it was water, he did not want to go forward, and he begged Maritornes to bring him wine, and she did so willingly, and paid for it out of her own money. As soon as Sancho drank, he gave his donkey some of the carcanos, and, opening the door of the inn wide open for him, he left it, very happy not to have paid anything and to have left with his intention, although it had been at the expense of from their usual guarantors, who were their backs. It is true that the innkeeper kept his saddlebags in payment of what was owed to him, but Sancho did not miss them, according to him he left disturbed. Chapter 18. Where the reasons that Sancho Panza spent with his lord Don Quixote are told, with other adventures worth telling. Sancho reached his master withered and fainted, so much so that he couldn't herd his ass. Now I just believe, good Sancho, that castle or inn, which is undoubtedly enchanted, for those who so heinously took up pastime with you, what could they be but ghosts and people from the other world? When I was by the fences of the corral watching the acts of your sad tragedy, it was not possible for me to climb them, much less get off Rocinante, because they must have enchanted me. Although I believe that those who enjoyed themselves with me were not ghosts or enchanted men, as your grace says, but flesh and blood men like us. And what I get out of all this is that these adventures that we are looking for, after all, will bring us to so many misadventures that we do not know which is our right foot. And what would be better and more accurate, according to my little understanding, was to return to our place. How little you know, Sancho, replied Don Quixote, of cavalry ailment. Shut up and be patient, what day will come where you will see by eyesight how honorable it is to walk in this exercise? If not, tell me, what greater happiness can there be in the world, or what pleasure can equal that of winning a battle and triumphing over your enemy? None, without a doubt. It must be so, answered Sancho, since I don't know, we have never won any battle, if it wasn't that of the Biscayan, and even from that one your worship came out with half an ear and half a helmet less, that, later here, everything has been sticks and more sticks, punches and more punches. To know how far the enemy's taste of victory goes, as your grace says. From now on, I will try to have at hand a sword made by such mastery, that whoever brings it with him cannot do any kind of enchantment. It was during these talks that Don Quixote and his squire were going when he saw Don Quixote that along the way they were going a large and thick cloud of dust was coming towards them. Seeing her, he turned to Sancho and said, "This is the day, O Sancho. This is the day, I say, on which the value of my arm will be shown, as much as on any other. Do you see that cloud of dust rising there, Sancho? Well, everything is curdled by a copious army that of diverse and innumerable people is marching there. On that count, there must be 2, said Sancho, because another similar cloud of dust also rises from this opposite side. He thought, without a doubt, that they were 2 armies that had come to attack each other and to meet in the middle of that spacious plain, because he had at all hours and moments filled the fantasy of those battles, enchantments, events, follies, loves, challenges, that are told in the books of chivalry. And the dust cloud that he had seen was raised by 2 great herds of sheep and rams that, along that same road, came from 2 different directions, which, with the dust, did not appear until they got close. Lord, what are we to do? What? Said Don Quixote, favor and help the needy and helpless. And you must know, Sancho, that this one who comes from our forward is led and guided by the great Emperor Alifanfaron, lord of the great island of Trapobana. This other one who walks behind me is that of his enemy, the king of the Garamantas, Pentapolin of the rolled up arm, because he always enters battles with his right arm bare. This Alifanfaron is a furious pagan and he is in love with the daughter of Pentapolin, who is a very beautiful and also graceful lady, and she is a Christian, and her father does not want to hand her over to the pagan king if he does not first abandon the law of his false prophet Mohammed and returns to his own. To my beard, said Sancho, if Pentapolin doesn't do very well, and I have to help him as much as I can. In that you will do what you must, Sancho, said Don Quixote, because, to enter such battles, it is not necessary to be knighted. But where shall we put this ass that we are certain to find after the fray is over? What you can do with him is leave him to his adventures, whether he loses or not, because there will be so many horses that we will have, after we emerge victorious, that Rocinante is still in danger. Don't barter him for another. And, so that you can see and notice them better, let's retire to that loft that is built there, from where the two armies must be discovered. That knight you see there of the Jal d'Arms, who carries on his shield a crowned lion, surrendered at the feet of a maiden, is the brave Lorcalco, lord of the Silver Bridge. But turn your eyes to this other part and you will see in front and on the forehead of another army the always victorious and never defeated Timonel de Carcajona, prince of Nueva Vizcaya, who comes armed with weapons divided into barracks, blue, green, white and yellow, and he bears on the shield a golden cat in a fawn field, with a letter that says, Mia, which is the beginning of the name of his lady, who, it is said, is the peerless Miulina, daughter of Duke Alfanican del Algarve. And in this way he was naming many knights from one and the other squadron, which he imagined. He gave them all their weapons, colors, companies, and nicknames unexpectedly. God help me, and how many provinces he said, how many nations he named, giving each one, with wonderful alacrity, the attributes that belonged to him, all absorbed and soaked in what he had read in his lying books. Sancho Panza hung on his words, without speaking any of them, and from time to time he would turn his head to see if he could see the knights and giants that his master named, and, as he did not discover any of them, he told him, Sir, I commend to the devil man, neither giant nor knight of how many your grace says it seems for all this, at least, I don't see them, perhaps everything must be enchantment, like the ghosts of last night. I hear nothing but a lot of bleating of sheep and rams. The fear you have, said Don Quixote, makes you, Sancho, that you neither see nor hear to the right, because one of the effects of fear is to disturb the senses and make things not seem what they are, and if it is that you fear so much, withdraw to one part and leave me alone, for I am only enough to give victory to the part to whom I give my help. And, saying this, he put the spurs on Rocinante, and, putting the lance in the ready, he came down from the coast like lightning. Sancho shouted at him, telling him, Turn around, your grace, Señor Don Quixote, I vote to God that it's rams and sheep you're going to attack. Not even for those did Don Quixote return, before, in loud voices, he was saying, Come on, gentlemen, those of you who follow and fight under the banners of the valiant Emperor Pentapolin of the rolled-up arm, follow me all. You will see how easily I give him revenge on his enemy Alifanfaron de la Trapobana. The shepherds and ranchers who came with the herd shouted at him not to do that, but, seeing that they were not taking advantage, they loosened their slings and began to salute his ears with stones like their fists. Don Quixote was not cured of stones, before, running around everywhere, he would say, Where are you, proud Alifanfuon? Come to me, that I am only a gentleman, who wishes, alone, to test your strength and take your life, in pain for the one you give to the brave Pentapolin Garamanta. He arrived at this a sugared alley from the stream, and, hitting him on one side, buried 2 ribs in his body. Seeing himself so battered, he believed without a doubt that he was dead or ill, and, remembering his liquor, he took out his alcoza and put it to his mouth, and began to pour liquor into his stomach. He reached for another almond and hit him in his hand and in his cup so hard that he broke it to pieces, taking 3 or 4 teeth and molars from his mouth along the way, and badly crushing 2 fingers on his hand. The shepherds came to him and believed that they had killed him, and so, with great haste, they gathered up his cattle, and loaded up the carcasses, which numbered more than 7, and, without finding out anything else, they left. All this time Sancho was on the slope, watching the madness that his master made of him, and he pulled out his beard, cursing the hour and the point at which fortune had made itself known to him. Seeing him, therefore, fallen on the ground, and that the shepherds had already left, he went down the slope and went to him, and found him in a very bad art, although he had not lost consciousness, and said to him, Didn't I tell you, Mr. Don Quixote, that he turned around, that what he was going to attack were not armies, but herds of rams? How can that disappear and contradict that thief of the wise man, my enemy? You know, Sancho, that it is very easy for such people to make us appear what they want, and this evil one who persecutes me, envious of the glory that he saw that I would achieve in this battle, has turned the squads of enemies into herds of sheep. If not, do one thing, Sancho, for my life, because you'll be disillusioned and see what I'm telling you is true, get on your donkey and follow them beautifully, and you'll see how, moving away from here a little, they will return to their original being. And, ceasing to be rams, they are full-fledged men, as I first painted them for you. But don't go now, I need your favor and help, come to me and see how many molars and teeth I'm missing, it seems to me that I have none left in my mouth. Sancho came so close that he almost put his eyes in his mouth, and it was just in time that he had already worked the bomb on Don Quixote's stomach, and, at the same time that Sancho came to look at his mouth, he threw out of himself, stronger than a shotgun, everything he had inside, and hit the compassionate squire's beard with all of it. "Santa Maria!" said Sancho, "and what is this that has happened to me? Surely the sinner is mortally wounded, for he vomits blood from his mouth." But, noticing a little more about it, he noticed in the color, taste, and smell, that it was not blood, but the balm of the Alcoza that he had seen him drink, and he was so disgusted that, his stomach churning, he vomited his guts on his own lords, and both of them were like pearls. He cursed himself again, and proposed in his heart to leave his master and return to his land, even if he lost the salary of what he served and the hopes of the government of the promised island. At this Don Quixote got up, and, putting his left hand over his mouth so that his teeth would not come out, he took hold of Rocinante's reins with the other. "You know, Sancho, that he is not one more man than another if he does not do more than another. All these storms that happen to us are signs that soon the weather will calm down and things will happen to us well, because it is not possible for evil or good to be durable, and from this it follows that, having lasted a long time, good is already near. So, you should not worry about the misfortunes that happen to me, because you do not have part of them. But, with all this, get on your donkey, Sancho the Good, and come after me, that God, who is the provider of all things, will not fail us, and more so as we walk in his service as we do, since he does not miss the mosquitoes of the air, nor the worms of the earth, nor the tadpoles of the water, and he is so pious that he makes his sun rise on the good and the bad, and rains on the unjust and the just. Ask God for it, son," said Don Quixote, "and guide where you want, for this time I want to leave it to you to choose whether to lodge us. But give me your hand here and feel me with your finger, and take a good look at how many teeth and molars I'm missing on this right side of the upper jaw, that's where I feel the pain." "Well, in this lower part," said Sancho, "your worship does not have more than 2½ molars, and in the upper one, neither half nor any, which is all as smooth as the palm of your hand. I wish they had knocked down one of my arms, if it wasn't the one with the sword, because I let you know, Sancho, that a mouth without teeth is like a mill without a stone, and a tooth should be valued much more highly than a diamond. Go up, friend, and guide, I will follow you at the pace you want." Leaving, therefore, little by little, because the pain in Don Quixote's jaws would not let him calm down or hurry up, Sancho wanted to entertain her and amuse her by saying something to her. Chapter 19. Of the discreet reasons that Sancho spent with his mistress, and of the adventure that befell him with a dead body, with other famous events. It seems to me, my lord, that all these misfortunes that have befallen us these days have undoubtedly been the penalty for the sin committed by your grace against the order of your chivalry, not having fulfilled the oath you made not to eat bread on tablecloths or with Queen Falgar. And you can also be certain that because of your failure to agree on it in time, that thing with the blanket happened to you. It doesn't matter that you haven't sworn, said Don Quixote, it's enough that I understand that of participants. The dark knight, the hungry squire and the master wanting to eat, saw that along the same path they were going a great multitude of lights were coming towards them, which seemed to be nothing but moving stars. Unfortunate me! If perhaps this adventure were about ghosts, as it seems to me, where will there be ribs that suffer it? No matter how many ghosts they may be, said Don Quixote, I will not allow them to touch the hair on your clothes, that if they made fun of you the other time, it was because I couldn't jump the walls of the corral, but now we are in the open field, where I will be able to wield my sword as I wish. When they distinctly saw what it was, because they discovered up to 20 jacketed men, all on horseback, with their burning axes in their hands, behind them came a litter covered in mourning, followed by 6 others on horseback, dressed in mourning down to the feet of their mules. To which at that point it was represented in his vivid imagination that this was one of the adventures of his books. He imagined that the litter was a litter where some badly wounded or dead knight must have gone, whose vengeance was reserved for him alone. Stop, gentlemen, or whoever you are, and tell me who you are, where you come from, where you're going, what you're carrying on those litters, that, according to the samples, or you have dated. We're going in a hurry, replied one of the jacketed men, and the inn is far away, and we can't stop to give as much account as you ask. It was the astonishing mule, and when he grabbed it by the bridle it was frightened so that, rising on its feet, it hit its owner by the haunches on the ground. A young man who was on foot, seeing the jacket fall, began to revile Don Quixote, who, already enraged, without waiting any longer, braced his lance, attacked one of the mourners, and, badly wounded, hit him on the ground, and, turning for the others, it was something to see with the alacrity that attacked and disrupted them, it seemed that Rocinante had sprouted wings at that instant, as he walked light and proud. All the jackets were fearful and unarmed people, and so, with ease, in a moment they left the fray and began to run through that field with their axes lit. The mourners could not move, so, very safe from him, Don Quixote beat them all up and made them leave their place badly. There was a burning axe on the ground, next to the first one who felled the mule, by whose light Don Quixote could see him, and, coming to him, He put the point of the lance in his face, telling him to surrender, if not, that would kill him. To which the fallen man replied, I'm exhausted, because I can't move, I have a broken leg, I beg your grace, if you are a Christian knight, not to kill me, that he will commit a great sacrilege, that I am licensed and have the first orders. I come from the city of Baza with 11 other priests, who are the ones who fled with the axes. We go to the city of Segovia accompanying a dead body, which goes in that litter, which belongs to a gentleman who died in Baza, where he was deposited. And who killed him? Don Quixote asked. God, by means of some pestilent fevers that they gave him, answered the bachelor. Unluckily, said Don Quixote, our Lord has relieved me of the work that I had to undertake to avenge his death if someone else had killed him, but, having killed him who killed him, there is only silence and shrug your shoulders, because I would do the same if I killed myself. I don't know how it can be to straighten the blind, said the bachelor, because you have made me blind by right, leaving me with a broken leg, which will not be seen straight all the days of his life, and the wrong that you have undone in me has been to leave me wronged in such a way that I will remain wronged forever, and it has been a lot of misfortune to run into you, who are looking for adventures. Since my luck has it that way, said the bachelor, I beg your grace, gentleman errant, who has given me such a bad run, help me get out from under this mule, which has my leg caught between the stirrup and saddle. He then called for Sancho Panza to come, but he was not cured of coming, because he was busy looting a spare mule that those good gentlemen brought, well stocked with things to eat. Sancho made a sack of his coat, and, gathering everything he could and fit into the bag, he loaded his donkey, and then he went to the voices of his mistress and helped to free the bachelor from the oppression of the mule. And, putting him on top of her, he gave him the axe, and Don Quixote told him to continue the defeat of his companions, to whom on his part he should ask pardon for the offense, that it had not been in his hand to stop having done. Sancho also said to him, if perhaps those gentlemen would like to know who was the brave man who put them in such a position, your grace will tell them that he is the famous Don Quixote de la Mancha, who by another name is called the Knight of the Sad Figure. With this, the bachelor left, and Don Quixote asked Sancho what had moved him to call him the Knight of the Sad Figure, more than ever. I'll tell him, answered Sancho, because I've been looking at him for a while in the light of that axe that rogue is carrying, and truly your worship has the worst figure, from a little here, that I've ever seen, and he owes it for having caused, either the fatigue of this combat, or the lack of the molars and teeth. Because I promise your grace, sir, and this is said in jest, that hunger and the lack of teeth make you so bad, that, as I have already said, you can very well excuse the sad painting. At this the bachelor returned and said to Don Quixote, I forgot to say that your grace should note that you are excommunicated for having violently laid your hands on a sacred thing, juxta il lud, sic suadent diabolo. The ass is as it should be, the mountain is nearby, hunger is on the rise, all we have to do is retreat with gentle feet, and, as they say, let the dead go to the grave and the living go to the loaf. Without replying again, he followed. And after a little distance they walked between two small mountains, they found themselves in a spacious and hidden valley, where they alighted, and Sancho soothed the ass, and, stretched out on the green grass, with the sauce of his hunger. But another misfortune befell them, which Sancho considered to be the worst of all, and that was that they had no wine to drink, nor even water to reach their mouths, and, plagued by thirst. Chapter XX. Of the adventure never seen or heard of that with little danger was completed by a famous knight in the world, like the one completed by the brave Don Quixote de la Mancha. These herbs testify that there must be some spring or stream nearby that these herbs moisten, that we will find where we can mitigate this terrible thirst that tires us. They had not gone 200 steps when a great noise of water reached their ears. I say that they heard that they gave some beats to the beat, with a certain creaking of irons and chains, which, accompanied by the furious roar of the water. Sancho friend, you must know that I was born, by heaven's will, in this our iron age, to resurrect in it the golden one, or the golden one, as it is usually called. I am the one for whom the dangers, the great deeds, the brave deeds are kept. So, tighten Rocinante's girths a little and stay for God's sake, and wait for me here for no more than 3 days, during which time, if I don't come back, you can return to our village, and from there, for doing me mercy and a good deed, you will go to Toboso, where you will tell my incomparable lady Dulcinea that her captive knight died for doing things that would make him worthy of being able to call himself his own. When Sancho heard his master's words, he began to cry with the greatest tenderness in the world and told him, Lord, I don't know why your grace wants to undertake this fearful adventure, now it is night, no one sees us here, fine. We can twist the road and stray from danger, even if we don't drink for 3 days, and, since there is no one who sees us, there will be less who will notice us as cowards. I left my land and left children and a wife to come to serve your grace, believing that I was worth more and not less, but, as greed breaks the sack, it has torn my hopes, because when I had them more alive to reach that black and ill-fated island that your grace has promised me so many times, I see that, In payment and barter for her, she wants me now live in a place so far removed from human treatment. By one God, my lord, that such a mess does not happen to me, and since your worship does not want to desist from undertaking this task at all, delay it, at least, until morning. That's right, said Sancho, but fear has many eyes and sees things under the ground, much more above in the sky, since, by good speech, it can well be understood that there is little from here to the day. Whatever else is missing, it must not be said by me, now or at any time, that tears and pleas kept me from doing what I owed in the style of a gentleman, and so, I beg you, Sancho, keep quiet. That I will turn around soon, either alive or dead. And so, when he was tightening the girths to the horse, beautifully and without being felt, he tied both feet to Rocinante with the halter of his donkey, so that when Don Quixote wanted to leave, he could not, because the horse could only move jumps. Hey, sir, heaven, moved by my tears and prayers, has ordered that Rocinante cannot move, and if you want to persevere and spur and hit it, it will be angering fortune and kicking, as they say, against the pricks. Don Quixote despaired at this, and the more he put his legs to the horse, the less he could move it, and, without realizing the bond, he had the good of calming down and waiting, or until dawn. Don Quixote told him to tell a story to entertain him, as he had promised. Once upon a time it was, the good that comes to all be, and the evil, for whoever goes looking for it. That is the natural condition of women, said Don Quixote, disdain those who love them and love those who hate them. But, seeing that the morning would come the sooner he walked, he very carefully untied Rocinante and tied his breeches. As Rocinante was free, although he was not spirited at all, it seems that he suffered, and began to slap, because he didn't know how to make corvettes excuse him. Seeing, then, Don Quixote that Rocinante was already moving, he took it as a good sign, and he believed that it was a good sign that he would undertake that fearful adventure. Taking his leave of Sancho again, he ordered him to wait for him there for 3 days, at most, as he had already told him once before, and that, if at the end of them he had not returned, he would be certain that God had been served, that in that dangerous adventure his days would run out. But that if God got him out of that danger safe and sound and without caution, he could consider his promised island much more than certain. Before, disguising himself as best he could, he began to walk towards the part where he thought the noise of the water and the beating came from. Sancho followed him on foot, carrying his donkey by the halter as usual, and they came upon a small meadow at the foot of some high rocks, from which a tremendous gust of water gushed forth. At the foot of the rocks, there were some poorly built houses, from among which they noticed that the noise and roar of that beating came out, which still had not ceased. Another 100 steps would be the ones they walked, when, they saw that there were 6 fulling mallets. When Don Quixote saw what it was, he fell silent and was stunned from head to toe. He looked at him, Sancho, and saw that he had his head bowed on his chest, with signs of being exhausted. At the sight of Sancho, he might stop laughing. And here he was repeating all or most of the reasons that Don Quixote said the first time they heard the fearful blows. Seeing, then, that Sancho was making fun of him, Don Quixote ran and got so angry that he raised the lance and placed 2 sticks on it, such that if, as he received them on his back, he received them on his head, he would be free to pay his salary, if it were not to his heirs. Calm down, your grace, that, by God, that I make fun of. Well, because you make fun of me, I'm not making fun of myself, replied Don Quixote. Come here, happy gentleman, do you think that, if like these were fulling mallets, they were another dangerous adventure, I had not shown the spirit that was appropriate to undertake it and finish it? Hasn't it been something to laugh about, and it's something to tell, the great fear we've had? I do not deny, replied Don Quixote, that what has happened to us is not worth laughing at, but it is not worth telling, that not all people are so discreet that they know how to put things to the point. At least, answered Sancho, your grace knew how to put the sandeel in the right position, aiming at my head and hitting me in the back, thanks to God and to the diligence I put into leaning over. But go, everything will come out in the laundry, that I have heard say, that one loves you well, that he makes you cry, and more, that the main gentlemen usually, after a bad word they say to a servant, then give him some breeches. The dice could roll, said Don Quixote, that everything you say would come to be true, and forgive the past, because you are discreet and you know that the first movements are not in the hands of man, and he is warned from now on in one thing, so that you refrain and report talking too much with me, that in how many books of chivalry I have read, which are infinite, I have never found that any squire spoke as much with his mistress as you with yours. So, from now on, we have to treat each other with more respect, without giving each other strings, because, in any way that I get angry with you, it must be bad for the pitcher. The favors and benefits that I have promised you will arrive at his time, and if they do not arrive, the salary, at least, must not be lost, as I have already told you. But, you can be sure that, from now on, I will not unfold my lips to make grace of the things of your mercy, if it were not to honor you, as my master and natural lord.